Hello, my name is Kian, and today we're going to talk about the Oxford Law interview. Now, the purpose of the interview is quite simple. It is meant to test if you have the skills necessary to become a lawyer. Now, remember to emphasize the following 3 skills in your interview. The first skill is reading and comprehension. Are you able to read and comprehend complicated texts in a very short amount of time? The second skill is whether you are able to summarize the complicated arguments in those articles and represent them in your own words. Now, the third skill is the most important. It is whether you are able to pick a position and defend your ground against opposing arguments or criticisms. And this is the thing which the interviewers at Oxford will be looking out for.
Okay, so now let's go through some of the possible scenarios which you might encounter in your law interview. And don't forget to emphasize the 3 skills which I mentioned earlier. So, typically in an interview, you might be given a statute. Now, a statute is a piece of legislation. So in this example, we are looking at the offense of criminal damage as set out in the Criminal Damage Act. That is a piece of statute. We are going to focus on one very particular offense. This offense is called criminal damage. First of all, what should you do when you are given a statute? I would like you to identify the proper elements of this offense. When you read a statute, ignore and try to resist the temptation to quickly skim over the statute. Okay? It is not like a novel. Every word in the statute is important. So make sure that you read the statute carefully. Try to pick out every different element in an offense. Okay? What is required? What are the different elements which you need in order to prove the offense of criminal damage? So let me give you an example. If we say that someone has committed homicide, we need to prove that he has the intention to kill somebody, and we also need to prove that he has actually committed an act which results in the death of someone else. So those are the elements of homicide. Now look back to our question here. What are the elements that we need to prove in order to say that someone has committed criminal damage?
So after you are asked to read the statute, you will typically be given a fact pattern, and you have to apply these facts to the law. So this is an example of a fact pattern. Pause the video and take a few moments to read this fact pattern. And afterwards, you can unpause the video to proceed. Okay. So now put yourself in the shoes of the prosecutor. What are the possible actions in the fact pattern which can allow you to establish the elements of an offense? Now, when you give your answer, it is very important not to have a knee-jerk reaction. Resist making moral judgments like, oh, Sally is very responsible, or Nigel is an irresponsible person and therefore he should be guilty. Resist the temptation to apply your own moral judgment to the facts. As a lawyer, that is not what you are expected to do. Okay? Do not immediately conclude that Nigel or Sally is guilty. Go through the different elements of the offense and then conclude whether there is such an offense. So, for example, what do you think is the activity in question? Are you going to talk about Sally and the magnet, or are you going to talk about Nigel and the computer? Was there any intention to cause criminal damage? And why do you think so? Okay, so make sure that when you give your answer, you should always substantiate your answer with explanations. Don't just say, I think he's guilty, full stop. Always give an explanation. Okay. So, moving on, sometimes you might also be asked to explain the sections of a statute. So let me give you an example. In the following question, you might be asked, what is the meaning of without lawful excuse? Okay, so moving on, sometimes you might also be required to explain the terms in the statute. So for example, look at the phrase below. The interviewer might ask you something like, what do you think is an example of lawful excuse? in the context of the offense of criminal damage. Now, at this point, what you are expected to do is to think quickly on your feet. The interviewer does not expect you to have sound knowledge of this offense before your interview. Okay? So just apply some common sense. Imagine, for example, that you are trapped in your room and then a fire takes place. So you are trapped in your room and a fireman comes to save you. But in order to save you, the fireman has to use an axe to break down your door. Right? So in that kind of situation, we might think that the fireman has a lawful excuse in order to save you. And so we would not convict him of the offense of criminal damage. That is one possible way which you can answer the interviewer.
So the second possible scenario, which you might see in the law interview, is a case. Now, cases are basically judgments. So you will be given the judgment of a short case to read, and afterwards you will get to discuss the outcome of the case with the interviewer. So typical questions include: do you agree with the decision of the judge? Why do you think the judge decided the case in this way? Okay? So always remember the third skill to emphasize. Pick a point, pick a position, and defend that position against anything which the interviewer might have to say to you. Okay? Now, let me also give you another example of a law-related question which can come up. So, for example, one of my students was asked in a previous interview, if a man is in prison and died, would it be right to kill this person and then use his organs to save 7 other people? This is in addition to the 2 other kinds of things which might pop up in an interview. So aside from the statute, the case, you might also have law-related questions, like the one I just asked. And as usual, what you are expected to do is to defend your position.
Okay, so before we come to the end, let's do a quick recap. We talked about the 3 main skills which you should emphasize in a law interview. Okay? We also talked about the possible scenarios that you might encounter. For example, a statute or a case. Now, here's the last thing to remember. You are not expected to have a complete understanding of the law before you come for your interview. Interviewers are not expecting you to know anything about the law. What they are testing is whether you have the ability to respond on your feet and apply common sense to the facts. And most importantly, like I mentioned just now, you should always be able to take a position and defend that position against criticisms and other counter-arguments. That is what the interviewer is looking for. I wish you all the best in your application.